You're born into the Middle Ages, that charming era where medicine was astrology with extra leeches, and hygiene was more of a rumor than a practice. The air smells like wet hay, spoiled beer, and generational trauma. The sky's gray, the roads are mud, and the only thing cleaner than your drinking water is your conscience, which, unfortunately, won't stay that way for long. You don't come from royalty. You're not a knight, not a monk, not even a peasant with the dream of someday owning 2 turnips. You're born into a family trade, and that trade is unaliving people. Executioner. You don't choose it. No one ever does. It chooses you. Or more accurately, your father does, when he hands you a stained axe and says,
"It's your turn now, boy."
Welcome to a career path with no retirement plan, no vacation days, and a reputation so bad, even the plague gives you social distance. Your childhood is unconventional. While other kids are learning to milk goats or dodge famine, you're learning blade angles and anatomy. Bedtime stories aren't fairy tales, they're case studies. You fall asleep to the soft lullaby of,
"Remember, son, always aim for the neck joint, not the spine."
Your toys, wood blocks, dull knives, and a family heirloom executioner's mask that smells like sweat, fear, and a hint of onion soup. You use it for hide and seek once. Nobody finds you, mostly because nobody wants to. School isn't an option. The village priest won't teach you your letters because technically you're cursed. So your education comes from observation, watching your father swing steel at dawn, your mother wash blood from linen at noon, and your neighbors cross themselves when you walk by. You learn early that people don't look you in the eye unless they're begging for mercy. You learn to keep your head down, metaphorically, because everyone assumes you'll take theirs, literally. Even the other kids keep their distance. You show up at the village fair, and the laughter dies faster than a condemned thief. Someone drops a meat pie, another whispers,
"That's the headsman's boy."
And suddenly, you're standing alone again, your father's shadow stretching longer than your future. It's not that you're a bad kid. You feed the stray dogs, help carry firewood, even try to make friends once. But friendship requires forgetting what your family does for a living. And nobody forgets that. At home, the walls are thick, but not thick enough. You still hear the quiet sobs of the condemned before dawn, the murmured prayers, the metallic scrape of the axe being sharpened. You tell yourself it's normal, that it's just work. But deep down, you know. Your childhood is already collateral damage. Your first lesson comes at age 10. Your father takes you to a hanging, says it's educational. The crowd jeers, the rope creaks, and you're told to watch closely. This is civic duty. You do. You watch the man's feet twitch like they're trying to run from fate. You don't eat for 3 days after. By 13, you've stopped flinching. By 15, you've started helping, cleaning blades, coiling ropes, carrying tools. Apprenticeship, your father calls it. Inheritance, the villagers whisper. You try to be proud. You tell yourself it's noble, that someone has to do it. And that's what keeps your family fed while others starve. But when your mother sews your first black hood, you feel the weight of it before you ever put it on. Because being an executioner's kid isn't about the work. It's about the isolation. No one invites you to weddings. The baker won't sell you bread unless you leave extra coin. And if your cat dies, the neighbors assume you killed it for practice. So you learn to laugh at yourself, to joke before others can. Yes, I come from a long line of neck specialists, you say, pretending it's funny. It's not. But humor becomes armor when shame is constant. You grow up in a house built on silence. Your father's hands are steady. His eyes, less so. You notice they never stay on your mother for long. Maybe because he can't look at someone innocent without remembering the guilty. At night, you ask him if it bothers him. The killing. He shrugs, says,
"It's the law that kills, not me."
You want to believe that. But when he stares at his reflection, you see doubt flicker like candlelight. And one day, when you catch him polishing the axe in complete darkness, you realize he's doing it by memory, not for maintenance, for penance. That's when it hits you. Your father's not just training you to kill. He's training you to survive what comes after. The quiet, the guilt, the unending echo of every final breath. So you take the axe, not because you want to, but because refusing would mean betraying him, and maybe starving too. Your childhood ends not with a birthday or a rite of passage. It ends the day you swing steel for the first time, and the crowd cheers while your stomach turns. And as you stare at your shaking hands, still warm from the handle, you understand the curse that came with your last name. You weren't born to live among people. You were born to end them. The profession nobody wanted. In medieval society, executioners existed in this weird gray zone. Not nobles, not peasants, just necessary evil with a tax ID. You had legal authority, but zero moral credit. You were both the hand of justice and the town's favorite cautionary tale. Children pointed at you in the street, priests hesitated to bless you, and if you sneezed, no one said, "God bless you," because clearly, he already didn't. You were paid by the state, but treated like a cockroach wearing a badge. Still, you kept your head down, mostly because you knew how hard it was to keep one attached. And yet, somebody had to do it. Justice, after all, must appear to be served, preferably in front of a cheering crowd that brought snacks. Your office is the worst place on earth. Your workplace smells like fear, iron, and regret. The tools of your trade hang neatly in a row, not because you're organized, but because misplacing an axe here counts as a workplace accident and a crime scene. There's the executioner's sword, polished but nicked, the rope, coarse and worn, and the block, soaked so deep in history it hums with bad energy. People like to imagine executioners as cold, unfeeling machines. But here's the truth. You hear everything. The prayers, the sobbing, the silence before the blade falls. That silence stays with you. It echoes. Psychologically, that's emotional compartmentalization. Your brain's desperate attempt to file trauma under miscellaneous. You tell yourself, it's just a job. Someone has to do it. Better you than some drunk guard with bad aim. But each time, a little piece of you gets shaved off, quietly, invisibly, until you stop noticing the weight of it. The paycheck from He.ll double hockey stick. You don't get a salary, you get fees. Payment depends on what kind of killing it is. A simple hanging, a few coins, a beheading. More, because decapitation apparently has a service charge. Breaking on the wheel? Bonus pay. Hazardous work, lots of cleanup. But here's the kicker. If you mess up, if your blade dulls mid-swing or your aim falters, the crowd doesn't just boo, they riot. They throw rotten food, rocks, sometimes fists. Because medieval justice wasn't about morality. It was theater, and if the performance went wrong, the actor got blamed. You'd think they'd offer dental insurance for this level of risk, but no. The only benefits package is don't get executed yourself. The social life of a pariah. Let's talk romance, or rather, the complete lack of it. No one wants to date the guy who decapitates people for a living. You're the human embodiment of bad vibes. When you walk into a tavern, the laughter dies faster than your last client. Bartenders serve you in silence, eyes lowered. The ale is cold, the air colder. You try small talk once. The man beside you asks what you do for a living. You tell him. He finishes his drink in one swallow and leaves. Your name circulates, but never in a good way. Medieval society runs on superstition, and you are basically a walking omen. A black cat with a side hustle and homicide. Even your house is cursed by association. It's always built at the edge of town, close enough to be found, far enough to be forgotten. You start to feel like a ghost haunting your own life. The family business. Here's the twisted irony. Executionership is hereditary. If your father was one, congratulations. Your career path was decided before your first tooth. You grow up watching him sharpen blades like other dads fix wagons. He teaches you technique, timing, and the importance of not flinching when heads roll. There's no bring your kid to work day. Every day is that day. At first, you cry after the first execution. By the 10th, you stop feeling anything at all. That's desensitization, a psychological defense that numbs emotional pain through repetition. But the more numb you become, the less human you feel. You begin to talk to the tools, to name them. Old Faithful, Mercy's Edge, the Equalizer. You start to forget people's names, but remember how their necks felt under the blade. That's when you realize your father wasn't cold. He was broken first. The weirdest perks in town. For all the misery, executioners did have benefits. You had legal immunity. No one could touch you because technically you served the law. You often got free lodging, some tax exemptions, and even the right to certain leftover goods from executions. In some towns, you could keep the clothes of the condemned, which sounds great until you realize you're basically running a second-hand murder boutique. You'd walk through town wearing someone's ex shirt, and people would whisper,
Isn't that the tunic of that thief from last week?
fashion statement? Yes. Social suicide? Also yes. You also got medical practice rights, because decapitating people apparently qualified you for surgery. So, you'd execute someone in the morning and stitch a villager's leg in the afternoon. Work-life balance, medieval edition. When the body fights back, execution wasn't a clean science. You're not working with guillotines yet. You're swinging swords, axes, weapons of imprecision, a bad angle, a dull edge, or a nervous twitch. And suddenly the crowd sees not justice but struggle. You swing, the blade catches bone, the head doesn't come off, you have to strike again. The air fills with gasps, curses, nausea. Some executioners practiced on animals to improve their aim. Others prayed, drank, or both. But no amount of rehearsal removes the weight of it. You feel the resistance, the sound, the moment between motion and silence, and it follows you home like a shadow with a heartbeat. That's moral injury, the internal damage done when duty forces you to violate your own sense of right. No priest can absolve that, because priests don't talk to you, so you carry it, quietly, like everyone expects you to. The psychology of isolation. You start having dreams, not of the dead, but of the crowds. Their faces blur, their voices echo. Sometimes they cheer, sometimes they laugh. You wake up sweating, the phantom smell of blood still clinging to your clothes. You avoid mirrors, because in the dark, when your reflection catches just right, it looks like them. The condemned. You try confession once, sneaking into a church at dawn. The priest listens, then realizes who you are. He tells you to leave. You do. That's when it clicks. You're both sinner and instrument, a necessary contamination. And that kind of existential paradox doesn't get easier with prayer. So you start talking less, thinking more. You drink alone, you work alone. And slowly, your mind becomes a quiet scaffold, all rope and echoes. If you've ever wondered what that kind of silence does to the brain, I've got a deep dive waiting for you. Just tap the card on screen. The irony of justice. Every execution feels justified, until it isn't. You start noticing patterns. Poor thieves die. Rich murderers get pardoned. The king's cousin accidentally kills a man. No trial, but a starving boy steals bread, and suddenly it's bring out the headsman. Justice starts to look less like law and more like theater, with better costumes. You see the hypocrisy, you see the cruelty, but you also see what happens to people who say those things. So you stay quiet. Because in your world, speaking truth is the fastest way to meet your coworkers from the inside of the scaffold. When karma wears a hood. Every town has its gossip, and the irony never gets old. When plague breaks out, people whisper, "The executioners cursed us." When crops fail, he angered God. When the mayor dies mysteriously, maybe the hangman's magic did it. You could donate money, feed the poor, rescue orphans, doesn't matter. You're still the boogeyman in every bedtime story. But you know the real curse? You can't leave. Executioners weren't allowed to move towns easily. Other cities refused to hire you. You were trapped in your own reputation, a professional scapegoat on permanent retainer, so you stay, year after year, watching generations grow up fearing your shadow. The moment you break. It happens one day during a routine execution, a woman accused of witchcraft, as usual. You look at her, and for a split second, she looks back without fear. And that glance, that quiet defiance, breaks something in you. You realize she's not a witch, she's just unlucky. And you, the law's hand, are about to erase her anyway. The crowd chants, the drums roll, you raise the sword, your hands shake. For the first time in years, you hesitate. The captain yells at you to continue. You do. But afterward, when the body drops, you feel nothing. Not guilt, not relief. Just an empty hum, like the world muted itself. That's emotional burnout, the point where empathy and exhaustion cancel each other out. And in that numbness, you finally understand what all those quiet silences meant. You were never feared because you were powerful. You were feared because you reminded everyone how fragile justice really is. The strange kindness of death. Old executioners rarely die in bed. Some are executed themselves, poetic symmetry at work. Others die in obscurity, buried outside consecrated ground because, technically, your job made you impure. But once in a while, when death comes quietly, it almost feels merciful. No more sharpening, no more screams, no more isolation. Just stillness, the kind you once gave others. And in that stillness, maybe, finally there's Ma. That Japanese word for meaningful emptiness. Because the one thing you gave to others without ever keeping for yourself was peace. The legacy nobody asked for. Centuries later, historians will study your profession. They'll call you an essential part of the justice system. They'll write books, make documentaries, and dramatize your life on streaming platforms. Someone will cosplay you at Comic-Con. People will romanticize your mask, your axe, your mystery. They'll forget the loneliness, the trauma, the smell, because history always edits the bloodstains out of the costume, and maybe that's okay. Because if anyone really saw what it felt like to be you, they'd never stop flinching. The psychology of the blade. At its core, the executioner's story is a study in cognitive dissonance, the clash between belief and action. You believe in justice, yet you enforce cruelty. You believe in humanity, yet you strip it from others. You convince yourself that obedience is morality because the alternative is unbearable. And in that dissonance, something tragic happens. You become the instrument of a system that no longer believes in its own righteousness. You start as a man with a blade. You end as a blade with a man attached. Why it really sucked. So, why did it suck to be born a medieval executioner? Because you inherited guilt you never earned? Because you enforced laws written by hypocrites? Because you were both punished and needed, both feared and forgotten? Because your humanity was the first casualty, and no one ever thought to bury it. You lived a life in parentheses, necessary but never accepted. You spent years surrounded by crowds, yet died completely alone. And history, in its poetic cruelty, remembers you only as a job title, not as the terrified child who once asked, "Why me?" Which do you think is worse, being the one who swings the blade or the one who orders it swung? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Smash that like button if your brain feels 30% darker but 70% wiser. And hit subscribe if you're into ideas that slice deep, figures that sketch. Ready for your next system update? Tap here and keep playing smart.